You could be reading a book and come in with this one preconceived notion, can't judge a book by its cover, of what the book is going to be about. And then it just completely rocks your world and changes your life.
I got confused along the way. I got insecure. I let other people tell me what I should be interested in, what I should be doing, and how I should be living my life. And I feel like getting back to that inner child really taught me how I want to be truly perceived in the world and what I actually care about that's deeper than money.
Everyone, and welcome back to Care So Much. I am so excited about today's guests. That's right, guys. We have two guests today. So we have Alana Baumann and Samra Michael. They are the hosts of the She Well Read podcast, which is a bite-sized book club to empower women to invest in themselves and each other, which is lovely and wonderful. And I just cannot wait to talk to them about today's topic. Another one of my favorite things, which is reading. Alana, Samra, can you please tell me a little bit about yourselves and why this is something you care so much about?
Of course. Yeah, I was waiting for Alana to kick it off because she usually does. But
I feel like I'm always stealing the show, so I give it a second and see if Samra's going to say something. But then if not, then I'm swoop in and all right.
Well, see, I can't deal with awkward pauses, so I just had to say something. So here we are. And yeah, I feel like reading is the first thing that changed my life and opened me up to new perspectives. So I wanted to share that with other people around me in a time that I was really searching for community. And, I feel like women and female friendship really empowered me throughout my life. I did deal with some family drama, growing up. And so reading was always somewhere I could escape and be myself and just, I don't know, explore other perspectives and things I think that this has been such a good outlet for me to be able to share my opinions with the world and then at the same time connect people through reading.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback off of Samra, which is funny because Samra's the story of our podcast is Samra's the one who came to all of our friends and was y'all, I'm going to start a book club. I just think it'll be so fun. And we had just graduated college. And so when you're in school, it's a million different things to do and ways to meet people and get involved with stuff. And then when you graduate, it's oh, real adulting where that doesn't really exist unless you go searching for it. So she was kind of creating it herself. And we were all oh yeah, that's such a great idea. We'd love to be a part of it. And Samra and I were just hanging out one morning and I had just gotten into podcasts myself of heavily listening to podcasts. And I asked Samra, I was what if I joined you and we turned this into a bite-sized book club podcast where we talk about these books and build this community with other people, not even just in the Birmingham area, but anywhere. Anybody kind of searching for that community that we were searching for, which is how we started our show.
There's so many things about reading, right, that are so wonderful. Obviously, you guys know that because you have this whole podcast about that. But I think one of the things that I have come to appreciate in the last few years as I've gotten back into reading that I didn't realize was so true of it is that idea of community. Something that seems like such a solo hobby can be this community building thing.
Yeah. So it's the story I'm thinking of is funny, haha, but funny, yikes, not us all having the same traumatic childhood. But we had a TikTok few months ago that we made where it was basically it was this 90s song playing in the background and it's just the two of us sitting there reading and it's loud music or whatever, and our caption was point of view when you read as a child to escape everything going on in the world behind you, all the chaotic stuff. And we didn't realize how many people had such a similar experience when it comes to reading and how it was kind of that escape for them. It literally takes you to a different world and you feel like you're in the book sometimes. And, some of those comments were even, I fell out of reading because now that I'm like not in that place anymore, it's like not that comfort, and like so many people trying to get back into reading. So I like how you mentioned that. And something we promote on our show is that we're the book club for all types of readers. Like we're not the traditional book club where it's like, if you didn't read the book, you can't be a part of the conversation. Like you don't even have to read if you don't want to. You can just listen to us talk about the topics that we're discussing in the book to feel a part of that community and add your input into that as well.
How do you guys then create, what is that experience like for your listeners to create a space where your podcast is a book club? You create a community with a podcast around books and reading.
Yeah, that's such a good question because I feel like a lot of people have this question but don't know how to ask it. And so they just kind of like vibe and they're like, okay, like I guess I'm here, but like not really here because I didn't read the book. And we're like, no, you don't have to read the book. Like there honestly is no there's like, I mean, a somewhat of a structure, but we try to keep it very minimal because I think that that's when you have the best conversations. So much of what we try to do is learn from each other, invest in each other, and just encourage everyone to step into their power through reading. And so, so much of it is just a conversation. And I think that when it comes to creating that community online, it's more of a challenge. And getting people to write in, getting people to like talk to us via social media, via email, via whatever it is, so that they can put their input in is kind of something we've been trying to, I guess, leverage through TikTok and just create more of a diverse amount of things that we're talking about that relate to people like us, because we've realized that people will latch on to certain things that they relate to that may not even be like based on the book we're reading this season or whatever the book we read last season, but like just the fact that they were a reader in a trauma filled environment is something that they could latch onto. Like, yeah, that's me, and yeah, like that's us too. So like come on, like come over here and talk to us about some of the themes that we like to talk about, which is just things that 20-somethings relate to. Things like female friendship, things like career related things, like when, you know, when you like maybe want to transition into something different, or how budgeting is hard in your 20s when you're trying to like work your way up a ladder that you didn't see for yourself originally. So like just all these things that connect us is what we try to showcase online to build that, like, I don't know, community.
You guys started this right when you were finishing college. I remember I've told several people, like people who, cousins and stuff who graduated after me, that graduating college was the scariest time of my life because you go from this incredibly structured, clear, goal-oriented thing to now you can do whatever you want, but you have to do something and it better be good because you did all these, like, so there's this bizarre amount of pressure. And then you go from having this built-in really, really solid community of all of these people that you have this thing in common with. And so I think that that's such a beautiful thing to then take that and find something else as this way to bring people together and to create that similar community. But I'm wondering, one of the things that you mentioned when you were talking at the beginning is the idea that reading changed your life, and that finding this podcast and coming back to reading at a time in your life when things were really kind of tumultuous. Why in a transition coming back to reading was something that felt really right, and how you guys kind of landed at the podcast.
Again, another thing we talk about on the show is like this idea of being well read. And it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, like I read a book in like a month or like a week or whatever, super readers. But like reading an article or reading like any type of piece of literature, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a book, but staying well read and well versed. And another thing I thought about was when I was younger, I was reading a lot of YA books and things that took me to a different place because I didn't want to be where I was. But now, as you know, that transition piece we talked about, I'm reading a lot more books on people that, you know, I would look up to, or we've lived similar lives, and reading their stories. And that's inspired me within my transitions, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Totally.
So like the types of books I'm reading now versus then has completely changed.
And do you find that that's something that is really grounding then, and is by reading books that are somebody who has a similar experience versus this escape, which I also read a lot of escape books when I was a kid. I wanted to get out of that. Do you find that that then attracts people who are interested in a similar experience and interested in understanding that kind of similar idea and want to have that same conversation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I find so many people, like one of the books that I can like think of right now is what I call a slow read, is All About Love by Bell Hooks. I've been trying to get through this book for months now, but it's so captivating and it hits you hard. Like you're like, oh, I didn't realize I have those feelings until I just read this sentence in this book that made me realize things. But it's all a part of growth. But I've seen other people who are also around my age who are reading the same book, or like have told, you know, I've talked about I'm reading it on the show, who have told me like, oh yeah, I'm reading it too. And I have the exact same experience as you did. So it kind of hits on that community piece again.
Yeah. Well, I really love the question, and I hadn't even thought about that. It's almost like a deja vu of the fact that you're going through something tumultuous, you're reading as a child, and then as an adult, kind of finishing the childhood situation, we kind of did the same thing again. I thought that was cool. So thank you for pointing that out, because I'm going to have to like think about that. I was definitely simmering. But I feel like so much of what we do when we don't know what to do next, which is the case sometimes when you're leaving childhood, entering adulthood, whether that be like graduating high school, graduating college, or whatever that is, I feel like we have to look inward to figure out what our next step should be in order, at least if you're concerned about being true to yourself. And so I think that the idea of like going back to something you did as a child and something that changed my life as a child, it's just so, I feel like, accurate in the sense that your child self was really, I feel, your true self. And everything that I wanted to do as a kid is everything that I'm trying to pursue now, because I'm just like, I got confused along the way. I got insecure. I let other people tell me what I should be interested in, what I should be doing, and how I should be living my life. And I feel like getting back to like that inner child really taught me like how I want to be truly perceived in the world and what I actually care about on a level that's deeper than money. And so reading, whether it be to escape for a little bit or if it's like something educational, I think that like that process, it is a solo thing. That process of being solo and reading can be really therapeutic and push you forward to the next step.
You almost just made me cry, because I didn't think about the fact that coming back to reading was something that was like healing for my inner child. It's something that I've talked about a lot. So I read like crazy as a kid. And then I got busy with the important things. Like you were talking about there, those things that ultimately are all feeding, making money. Because like why do you go to college? It's not for some self-improvement thing. The reasons they motivate you to go to college are because that's the only way to have a good career. And then I would work a billion hours all the time. I totally burnt out. I had people who listen to all of the episodes of the podcast know this story. Totally burnt out, had a complete breakdown, really changed my career, changed the way that I was prioritizing things, and realized exactly what you're talking about, which is like coming back to yourself and realizing that that true version of yourself has been sort of trained away from us. And I think particularly since the pandemic, when we all had to stop doing what we were doing, we had this moment of being able to go, oh, okay, so a lot of those things actually like were not important. Like realizing that as I worked in marketing, that's not what are they? They were all called critical workers? No, what were they called? Essential workers.
Essential workers, yeah.
Yeah. I was not an essential worker. Like, I worked for a healthcare company, but me being a marketer was like not essential for the world continuing to operate. I know, at least I'll speak for myself. I felt like it was. Like, I felt like if I didn't do my job really well, if I didn't get that promotion, if I didn't deliver at this insane level that was expected of me, people were going to die. Like, that's the stakes that was being set. And coming back to myself in these last couple of years, I didn't even think about the fact that that's around the same time I started reading again, and like reading again for me and not for some other reason. So that really resonated with me. And I think that connects really well to another thing that you've mentioned a couple of times and is actually part of your mission statement for the podcast, which is like the idea of reading as empowerment. And I think that resonates with me as something that is true, but I don't know that I could articulate exactly how and why that's true.
I've loved the first book we read and like the current book that we're on now, but the second book that we did for our second season, it's called More Than Enough by Elaine Welteroth. I will not stop bragging about that book because it is one of my top favorite kind of autobiographies, life lessons, early 20s, female empowerment, Black women rock book. Because reading those chapters and because it starts at like her birth, through her early life, through all of her school years and all of her college years. And when Elaine gets to, Teen Vogue, Condé Nast, all of those experiences were very similar people. I found like I saw myself in Elaine. And as I've come into this age of transition, that's what I needed. And I didn't know I needed it. And that's another thing I like about books. Like, you could be reading a book and come in with this one preconceived notion, can't judge a book by its cover, of what the book is going to be about. And then it just completely rocks your world and changes your life. So that's something that I even, when I'm telling people about reading and books, like, listen, I know it sounds like this mundane, even sometimes boring thing that people are trying to throw at you or convince you to do, but it can be so powerful and encouraging. And then taking those stories that we've learned and sharing it with others. So even if, like I said, if they don't decide to read the book, those stories can still be told.
That is so real, Alana. Like, reading all of these women's stories, and honestly, the fact that it's bite-sized has really helped me digest everything even deeper, because I think that it's almost like looking at an album as a whole and then looking at it as individual like tracks, if that kind of makes sense. Like, I can look at Beyonce's new album, Renaissance, as a whole and be like, yeah, like, that's fucking fantastic. Like,
Genius body of
wow,
work.
amazing, da 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 da. But if I look at each track, they're each trying to tell me something different. Even if you think about episodes in a season, like, there's a season as a whole, and then each chapter, in the case of a book, has like individual things that we're taking away. And I think that when we're reading as books as a whole and we're not taking that time to digest it slowly, you can oftentimes miss a lot of stuff. And that was just off topic, but like, when it comes to your question, I really love the question. But like, the fact that I just don't see how you can separate reading and empowerment, to be honest, because it's like, when I think about all the movements in the world, when I think about feminism, when I think about intersectionalism, when I think about racism, when I think about even religion, they were all written down and passed on through generations. And the fact that history is all like written in textbooks, and then you can like go deep dive into a specific like era and check out the authors from that era and get a different perspective from what the textbooks are teaching you. And to me, that level of like different perspectives can give you like a bigger, almost like an album version of history, instead of like the single tracks that are like textbooks, which are just trying to teach you, whatever it is that they're trying to teach you. Mm-hmm. And then you've got other people who are like writing from their heart, and it may be controversial, and there's things that are poetry music, because I feel like that's a form of poetry. All of these things like can give us a different perspective. And I think that's really what true empowering is. It's not like brainwashing you into one perspective, but it's giving you the freedom to explore what it is that you're trying to learn about and then creating your own perspective.
Connects really well, at least to my understanding of something that I wanted to make sure to ask you guys as well, which is the name of your podcast is She Well Read. And I'm wondering if you guys could explain why that's the name of the podcast and what that means to you guys.
I'm going to throw the mic at Samra because she's the one who came up with the name. And I too had questions at first, so I'm going to let her explain.
Okay, so She Well Read. I don't know, it's just one of those things that just like came to me kind of. But I think that it really just explains like our whole mission, which is just that being well read empowers you. And specifically as women, I think that being well read is so important. And that's really just what we're trying to push, because society and media will tell you one thing about who women are and what we're capable of. And it's not until you read and learn from different people around you, specifically women, like who women actually are and what we can be. And so the fact that we are trying to be well read, not just through reading, but through conversation, like that podcast aspect of it, I think that it just like encapsulates everything that She Well Read is and represents.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that and like the funnier version of, of the name, because we get a lot of like, why isn't it She's Well Read? Like it's grammatically incorrect. And like my response to that is like, so what? So it's like, why does that matter? Like the point behind it is what matters. And I think sometimes that also gets lost in translation when it comes to reading. And it's like, okay, like why should I care? Well, because it's important, but like don't like take the like what you think reading is and all of those things, like the negative connotations that reading gets a lot, and like move past that. Like let's figure out why this is important, because, and I know I'm getting a little deep here, but even in history, like us as Black women and Black people, it was kept away from us reading in general. Like we were not allowed to read. And it's like, why? Well, because it's empowering. It goes back to that empowerment piece you were talking about. It's impactful. It's important. So my funny version of like why, when people are like, why is it She's Well Read? I'm like, well, why does it matter? Like what's the bigger picture here?
As a marketer, I think the name is so clearly for a specific audience to me. I think it says it's not excluding anybody. It's not saying you can't be a part of this, but it is saying who it's for. And I think that is for Black women. And I'm curious if that was part of the intent for you guys.
I feel like it was an unconscious intent, because it's really not supposed to be exclusive to even just women. Like my boyfriend is a very avid part of this book club.
He is one of our biggest fans. Even before they were together.
Yes, like, and he's a man, and like he's a very different, like he's like just not the type that you would think would be that into it. So I at the time was so surprised that he listened to it and like actually was tuning in every Wednesday, because that's not necessarily who we thought would appreciate hearing our voices, to be honest. Like we just thought it would be women, because the things we talk about relate to us, and we're women and we're Black women. So even more so, like it became about Black women. And I didn't even think about She Well Read. Like She Well Read, like that does it's giving Black women. And that just came out because we're Black. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't even realize that when you're doing it. But yeah.
When I say it's really good marketing, the hardest thing for most of my clients to understand is that you are not going to be for everyone. Who do you want your message to appeal to? Who are you saying this to? You're not saying other people can't enjoy the podcast by calling it She Well Read, but like if I stumbled into your podcast, started listening to it, and then got mad about the fact that you guys were talking about being Black because I'm a white woman and that makes me feel excluded, title of the podcast should include me in that you guys are Black women and you're going to be speaking about your experience as Black women. And so that's what I mean by that. It's like, if a white man stumbles into your podcast and starts listening to a podcast called She Well Read and is surprised to hear it's Black women talking about being Black women, they're the one who did it wrong, not you guys.
No, that's
that
facts.
would be so, yeah, it'd be like
Funny,
hello?
goofy, yeah.
But we do, like, honestly, I feel like it was very conscious of us to be super transparent. I mean, as transparent as, like, you can be in a podcast that's being, like, that's available for everyone to listen to. But, like, we didn't want to be, what's the word when you, like, code switch? So, because we are trying to create a safe space for ourselves, first and foremost, we wanted to be adamant about being ourselves, not code switching. We even, like, we weren't sure about the cursing. We eventually were like, okay, like, that's just who we are. But I agree, like, it's been a process of realizing who we want to appeal to and also understanding that we may push some people away. Like, we both have crazy strong opinions that could be controversial, and we could just, like, say whatever just for the sake of the podcast and not making people mad. And even in this past episode, there's, like, I've been thinking about what I said in the episode, and I'm like,
it's so funny. I started editing it and I was like, this is like, especially because I know you, I'm like, this is fucking hilarious.
But I just, like, was literally in the car talking to my boyfriend, and I was like, I want to be more myself, like, even more strong about what I feel. Like, I don't want to diminish that passionate part of myself just to be, like, something that could appeal to mass audiences, because we could do it for the sake of the numbers, but, like, that just, it's so not what we're about. And I just feel like that's everything that we were trying to escape, because I feel like that's so exactly what the corporate world is and why it sucked everything out of our souls, and we needed something to give us life again. You know what I mean? Like, we can't take that away from our podcast, because that's what I think makes people love us too.
Everything that you said there is, like, so spot on too. I think part of what makes podcasts fun, right? Like, podcasts create these little spaces. It's something that I found in this show. It's something that I found in my other podcasts that I have, where it's like, you attract, the more specific you are, the more that you're going to attract those kinds of people. And then those are the people that are going to stick with you. Because we're talking about how it excludes certain people, or just, like, isn't necessarily appealing to the wrong audience. But I also think that there's so many things that you guys have mentioned that are so welcoming to what is clearly your right audience, which is the idea that you guys have done this bite-sized reading, and you're trying to make this something that people can feel comfortable and confident in and feel welcomed into. The idea that this is to empower more people and to help people empower themselves and each other. Why you did it the bite-sized, and what some of the other ways you guys try to be that welcoming space that people can come into and feel confident in.
Yeah, so we actually, like, put in the bite-size piece, or I should say Samra did. It was Samra's idea, the bite-size book club podcast, because we were trying to figure out a better way to explain our show to people, because we are, again, that abnormal book club. Like, we're not finishing 6 books in a month. Like, that's just not realistic to our lives, but we do the best we can. And especially when it comes to reading. So making it bite-sized, meaning, you know, each season we're doing one book, and each episode is an episode of that book. So you can get bite-sized amounts of this book throughout the season. So that's kind of where that bite-size setup comes in. So another thing we do on the show is we have gotten, like Samra was saying, a lot more vulnerable and open about our personal lives and our experiences, especially when it comes to mental health. Samra and I both face mental health struggles, and I know, like, mental health is a very big hot topic right now. but as it should be, because it is very important and was, like I like to say, it was slept on for a long time. Like, it explains so much. But yeah, so we found, even it was a few months ago, there was another podcast. They were, unfortunately ending their show, but they were kind of mental health based, and they were, giving suggestions for other shows to listen to. And I wouldn't have even categorized our show as like a mental health space, even though we talk about it all the time. We talk about therapy all the time. And they were like, yeah, y'all should go listen to She Well Read. They talk about their mental health struggles and therapy and da-da-da. And I was like, oh, wow, like people are seeing us as that type of space too, which is amazing and awesome, and was kind of, like Samra was saying, unintentional. But I'm glad that it's happening and that people can feel even deeper connected to our community because they feel even deeper connected through us and our shared experiences.
My favorite podcasts and my favorite spaces are the ones where people are being vulnerable and they are doing that. I was just trying to think about how I would describe your guys'. It feels more like an actual book club, like those in-person book clubs that I'm used to people having, where like you guys talk about the book, like, don't get me wrong, but it also feels like the first like 10, 15 minutes, or sometimes just like that part where you're getting your snacks and you're having you're pouring yourselves a glass of wine, and like you're just kind of giving updates on your lives. And it really feels like that in listening to your show. And I've listened to mostly season 3. It's wonderful to know that that's the way it's evolving and that's the direction that you guys have chosen to move with it. Well, we've been talking for almost 40 minutes about reading and haven't mentioned the title of one book. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about, first of all, the books that you guys have talked about on your show, and then also maybe some specific books or genres or different types of reading that you really enjoy and care a lot about?
Okay, so the first season we read Please Don't No. Text Me When You Get Home. It's just a lot of reading over here, okay? Can't keep this straight. Text Me When You Get Home by Kayleen Schaefer. And that's an author I'd never read before. And it was just super unique because I just didn't know how many different facets of female friendship you could talk about. You know what I mean? Because it seems like, okay, wrap it up, one chapter, we love it. But there is a lot to dive into, and like getting into the history of female friendship, how female friendship wasn't even allowed before a certain time. Like, men were keeping us away from each other because like we would gossip, and they thought that was like sorcery and stuff. Like, there's so many random things about female friendship and how it's almost a resistance to be friends with women. And I don't know, you can see it in the media, like they love to put us against each other. And we as women, like, we're always trying to push that we should not be against each other, even though it happens all the time. I'm getting tired of it. But whatever. But so that book was really great and was just like different. It was outside of my reading comfort zone. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah. And it was also because, again, that was the first book coming into our show after we just said, like, okay, we're going to relate our show and the books to things that are going on in our personal lives. So at that time, we were struggling with friendships coming out of school, and all of us going through this rapid transition, and us changing as individuals as well, and how to navigate that, and seeing in the book how that it is, and it does, and it will change over time. And you kind of just roll with the punches, but it's like a very beautiful experience all at the same time. Because even we talked about on the show, or in that season particularly, that there's friends that we had in college that we are no longer affiliated with, but it's not a place of hate or anything like that. It's just we outgrew that friendship. But I, like, even today, I can look back on old pictures and remember those good times. And I don't even think about like the fact that, oh, I'm not friends with them anymore. Da, 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 da. I kind of like dive into, oh, like that experience was so fun and was needed in that moment of my life. And just be more happy about it than sad that it's over.
I have a quick anecdote that ties a million things we talked about together, which is the idea of I graduated college. I felt that adrift that you guys were talking about. And I went back to therapy. Oh, it's all mental health. And I had a therapist who I kept talking to her about how my people who had been my support and how I got through because college isn't an easy experience. Leaving college is tough, but that doesn't mean college was an easy experience. But I had my community there and I had my people that were part of my life. And most of those people I still was physically close enough to that I felt like I should be able to maintain those friendships. And I remember my therapist saying to me that I was grieving those friendships. And I was like so taken aback because I thought that meant that I wasn't friends with them anymore or that I couldn't talk to them or whatever it is. And she goes, I'm not even saying you're not going to be friends with them anymore. I'm saying whatever it is, it's different now. Like you're different now. Your life is really different now. Their lives are really different now. And you guys used to have this really big thing in common and you don't anymore. And so I was grieving that like phase of the friendship. And there are absolutely people who I used to be incredibly close to who I no longer necessarily speak to. Losing that friendship was really hard. And so I think that that's so interesting that we were at similar phases of our lives having a similar kind of realization and growth. And I'm definitely going to read that book now.
Yeah. And like, that's all of what you just said and like all the relating we're doing right now and like shared similar experience. That is the premise of our entire show. Like we're all living the same lives out here. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about our stories.
So what was season 2 of the podcast? What book did you guys read for season 2?
So season 2 was More Than Enough by Elaine Walter Roth. And that one, I think I picked that one. And because we were going back and forth and picking at one point. And I picked it because I had done a little research on Elaine and just was inspired by just the synopsis of her story that I was like, oh, I want to know more. And especially because, you know, I work a 9 to 5 and I know we'll get into this, but like I've been looking into transitioning out of that and more into a creative space, like within podcasting. And so her story like talks about that and how it is scary and can be really scary taking those risks, especially when you're younger. But like she emphasizes the point that this is now the time to do it. Like if you're going to do it now. And like, you're not even going to have regrets, even if you fail, which is something big that I took away from that book as well, is that you'll learn something from it. Like, even if it does fall to pieces, it's going to be okay at the end of the day. And just watching her story and like, we feel like we know Elaine at this point because we know so much of her story. Like, if you listen to the season, we're like yelling at her about stuff that she did in the past that's like no longer even relevant now, but it's relevant to us at that time. And we're like, why would you do that? Like, what made you think that was okay? And so again, diving into these people's lives that we don't even know about, but we feel so connected to. So personal favorite season of mine is season 2. And Samra, do you want to talk about the current book we're reading?
Yeah, okay. So the third season's book is Please Don't Sit on My Bed in Your Outside Clothes by Phoebe Robinson, who is Dope Queen Phoebes on Instagram. She's like super fun. And I mean, I don't want to just say she's fun because she's a boss and she has created not only a production company, but her own TV shows on several different networks and just everything she's doing in the comedy space and the entertainment media space is so fantastic. And really all of it is really empowering towards women, but Black women specifically. She's just owning who she is and not apologizing, which I think we see a lot of Black women apologizing. And it's so cool to me to see one who is unapologetic about who she is. And she makes us feel emotions too, I have to say. So, it's been great to read her book. And hers is a series of essays. So it's kind of like all over the place a little bit, but all of it has been way more empowering and feel good at the end of every essay than I thought it would be. Like she'll start us in one place at the beginning of an essay, and then by the end I'm like, I had no idea we would end up here, and the things you've tied in along the way are so relevant, but I just never would have thought that. And I think this one is really the one where I'm like, wow, breaking down each essay has been super great because there's just a lot more content to talk about within the essay than it seems. Like me and Alana we have like a 1 hour limit, and it's really hard to stay under that limit because we could talk all day about the stuff she brings up. There's like career stuff, there's relationship stuff, life stuff. And we've been doing this thing where our audience chooses our books. So they chose that book. And I have no regrets. And hopefully we can let our audience choose all of the books going forward, because I think that would really help the community aspect of it, because we are all living the same lives, like Alana said, even though, we try so hard to be like different than each other. We're all really the same at our core.
I was so excited when I saw what book you guys were reading, because I'm like, I think I have that on my like pile of TBR books that has just been sitting in my house. I have her other book. Oh no, I have to buy more books. So tough.
What a shame.
It's a tough life I live.
Oh my gosh, I literally saw a TikTok today. This girl stitched it. It was like this one girl, she was in Barnes & Noble, like, this is your sign to go to Barnes & Noble and buy more books. And then it stitched over to this other girl. It's like, she's not talking to you. Go look at your TBR list and read those first before you even step foot into another bookstore. I was like, that was at me.
Yes, it was. I also saw that today on my movie. And
living the same lives.
I am also on the side of TikTok that's like, buying books and reading books are two different hobbies. Because I love a local bookstore. I'll like go spend hours. And then any local bookstore, the one in town, they already know me and they know that I'm going to buy something no matter when I go in there. But I love going into a local bookstore or somewhere I'm traveling to and buying a book. And then I have to buy a book. I'm supporting local businesses.
Right. And that's like a souvenir if you're doing it when you're traveling.
Yeah. It's a lot of different things. And that's the reason why I have like 20 books in my room right now that I haven't read.
Right.
The first book you picked was maybe outside of a book you would have chosen to read without the podcast. I'm curious what your book comfort zone is. What are the books that you're just eating up, reading them all the time?
For me, as much as I have transitioned out of YA books, I am still deeply invested in YA books. Like, I'm trying to, like my favorite author ever, Kiera Cass. I'm obsessed with her books, like the Selection series, and she has the Siren, and she has these new books like the Betrothed series. I'm on the second book right now, and she has another one that I've already pre-ordered. Again, haven't even finished the current book that I'm on, called 1,000 Heartbeats. And I have kind of dived back into that escapism again. Not because I'm trying to escape like badness surrounding me like I was when I was a child, but more like this has nothing to do with what's going in my life right now. And I think I need that. Like just something different that I can like dive into and focus on that has nothing to do with what's actually happening around me.
Samra, I'm definitely going to make you answer this, but I wanted to mention just on the YA books thing. To get out of the reading slump, I am rereading, I don't know if you guys ever read Tamora Pierce books. I'm rereading those because those were some of my favorite books when I was a kid. I'm really, really enjoying them. And it's part of the reason why it made me think of this is the main character of the first book is Alana.
Oh, fun. Now I have to read it. Now I have to buy another book.
It's so hard to be you. Oh my gosh. Samra, please tell us what books you like to read.
Well, since you asked, I don't even know. I really don't know what I like to read. I love like...
Girl, you love fashion books. You like pop culture, entertainment.
I do love like a think piece of some sort. So whether it's a sustainable fashion article or a book or something from the 1980s about feminism or racism. I feel like I've been trying to get into more Black authors that I didn't know about growing up. So like Bell Hooks, that Alana's reading, I've been trying to get that book from her for forever, but it's just, She's taking her time, so that's
Hey,
okay.
hey.
No pressure at all. But I'm excited to read it too. But
I was about to say, you know what the real reason is? Is because once I finish that one, that's when I'm going to finally start I'm Glad My Mom Died. And you're itching to get that one too.
Oh, yeah,
Oh
I
my
am.
God.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to read that book. I don't think I've been waiting to be emotionally ready for it.
That part.
Because I know it's going to hit me really hard. I've cried for an hour just watching her talk about that book. So
that one sounds so emotional. No, but like a memoir is great for me. Like I guess I'm nosy maybe. So specifically in a memoir about someone in the fashion space is really interesting to me because you kind of get like the behind the scenes on what was happening in the 2000s and before then that I wasn't even aware of. And so through like books like that are related to fashion, I'll like go down different rabbit holes. So even like coffee table books, honestly, I think that's my genre now that I think about it, because I love a book with like big pictures and that I can just like get inspiration from. And I think that sometimes, as much as I love a story, like it doesn't allow me to go crazy in my brain. I think that like a coffee table type book where I can just escape into pictures and just like have an aesthetic that I'm diving into is really fun for me and kind of a more unique reading type of thing for me.
yeah.
My like ability to focus for longer than an article is just it's like very much an article. It's not giving sit down for 2 hours and read. It's so sad though, because that's like I used to be able to read for hours and it's just like gone.
I don't think it's fair for us to compare ourselves to child versions of us. I used to do a lot of things. I used to just like fall all the time and be fine. Like, I don't expect myself to be able to do that.
Okay, fair though. We're evolved. But like I want to devolve in that sense because
Yes.
it was nice to be able to tune things out.
It really was for me letting go of the idea that things had to be bringing value to my life. They had to be, like you mentioned right at the beginning, like you have to be pursuing things that are going to make you money as opposed to pursuing things that are going to bring you joy. It's something that when I was talking to Sanjana about romance books and why she loves romance books and all of that stuff, we talked a lot about the fact that you can just read things because they're fun if you want to. But I didn't think of coffee table books as a genre that I enjoy until you mentioned it. And I have a bunch of coffee table books. And one of my favorite books I own, I think of almost like a work of art. It was a gift because it turns out very expensive. Have you ever seen the book, the Obama photographer book that he put out? The White House photographer?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So magical.
It's amazing.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Genuinely, I used to keep it on my coffee table and then too many people almost spilt on it. So now it's in a safe drawer. It was absolutely one of those books when like I'd pick it up and just read about one of these gorgeous pictures. You learn about this. It's similar to so many of the things you mentioned because it's a coffee table book. It's got beautiful pictures that are so interesting. And then you get to read stories about these people's lives from a perspective that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
It's almost like going to an art museum, but like you get to sit there.
Yeah, I wouldn't have listed that on favorite genres, but now it definitely is.
Oh yeah, it counts.
For sure. Everybody is going to buy the books that you suggested, which you have a bookstore on your website. Is that correct? That you guys have a way that people can find these books so they're not buying them through Amazon?
Yes, bookshop.org.
Great. So we'll put all the links to all the books that we mentioned here. So please don't crash your cars trying to search for these while you're driving, because I know I listen to podcasts while I'm driving.
Same. And then I'm trying to like search it and I'm like, stop, pay attention to the road. And I'm just like, remember the time marker when you get home.
Yeah, for sure. But I always like to end with how can people get more connected with the stuff that we talked about. So I think there's the obvious way of this is such a welcoming space that you guys have created with your podcast. They can go back and listen. You guys have 3 seasons. Do you do a season a year, or is it just based off the book?
It's based off our lives.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're on season 3 right now. And obviously, when you start podcasting, it's very like an animal being born, trying to figure out its legs and its standing. That's very much how this show has gone. Like each season, I feel like it's getting better because we're understanding what we're doing more and getting a better feel for the space. So we're hoping that now we're like, season 3, we're on season 3. Like we know pretty much what we're doing at this point, besides like life happening and like throwing wrenches here and there as it does. But we're hoping to have seasons be closer together. Okay. But we've had about a season a year. So who knows down the line, like what that will look like, but we're hoping like the next season won't be as long as a gap as this past season.
That's obviously a great way to get into reading. But if there's somebody who is out there listening to this being like, maybe they used to read as kids or maybe they didn't, but they like the idea of all the things that we've talked about as the advantages of reading, how would you recommend somebody go about getting into reading?
That's a great question. I feel like, I don't want to be basic, but I feel like reading stuff you're interested in. I don't know. This feels like a cop-out answer.
No, the cop-out answer, that's the thing. I try to ask a question like this at the end of all the podcasts that I do, because I think often people will listen to it and they're curious about the topic. And I think those basic answers are basic to somebody who's doing the thing, right? But somebody who's not and is intimidated by it and can't think of how to get into the thing, that's the kind of answer they need. The idea that there are books for everything, and if there's something you're interested in, something you're spending your time on, go find a book that is fun for you, that brings you joy, that is something that you find interesting and appealing. There's books for literally everything. So you can go find one like that.
The original app, like before apps were a thing, there's a book for everything.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was like, oh, duh. So a couple things that I have is one, something that helped me get into reading was making it a part of my routine again, because I live such a busy life that I'm like, I don't have time for this, but I'm like, but if I set aside this time for it, then it can get done. And it doesn't have to be this like long thing. Like, we talked about reading for hours. As adults, we don't have time for that. Be realistic. So I try to, before I go to bed, like instead of watching the next episode on Netflix, I take 30 minutes to just read, even if I don't finish the chapter, which my like type A self has had to get used to, of like, if my 30 minutes are up and I'm like about to pass out and go to bed, like don't strain your eyes to finish this chapter because you're not done with it. So setting, you don't have to be as extreme as me. If you want to keep going, keep going. But, just setting like that small amount of time. It could even be 15 minutes. Like that's your goal. Like you just start at 15 minutes of reading a day, and you start that way. Or it doesn't even have to be a book. Like we talk about being well-read looks differently. It doesn't even have to look like you reading a book. Read an article that you're interested about. And that'll kind of like get you in the habit. And another thing that I didn't think of until now was, if when you watch TV, there's certain genres or shows that you're into, well, dive into what those genres are and then find books that relate to that. And I'm going to plug TikTok because TikTok is where I find everything. It's my Google. And so then going on Book Talk and seeing like those types of books, like Samra mentioned that she's trying to get into more Black authors and more BIPOC books. There's a whole section of TikTok just for that. So there is a whole section of TikTok for you to find these books of genres that you're interested in. Or really just, a simple Google search can do that too. We already plugged our bookshop. There's a ton. We have so many different like sections on our bookshop of different types of books. They're all over the place. So you'll probably find something on there.
Yeah. One of the books that I saw on your website that we would have talked about for an hour if we didn't have other interesting things to talk about is Hood Feminism, is one that I read a couple of years ago. And that was one of those like life-changing books of like, it just expanded my idea. Like I did not realize what a white feminist I was until I read that book. And I was like, oh, Okay, that's the problem with me.
Self-reflection.
And I think that books are such a great way to, one of the things that I talk about, similar to TikTok, what you mentioned with TikTok, one of the things that I talk about that I like with TikTok is I get to see the way that people who have some different identity from me talk to each other, because they're not making it for me, and I get to just witness that and hear that. Yeah. And I think books can be the same way. You can read a book that is not written for you, that is not designed to make, I think, particularly white people comfortable. It's an opportunity to really hear how the conversation sounds when you're not in the room, because it really matters that you understand what that sounds like. And some of them are on your guys' bookshelf right now.
That's awesome.
Obviously, everyone is obsessed with you now, because why wouldn't they be? So how can people, in the most loving and least scary way, stalk you on the internet?
Oh, my favorite pastime of shouting out the show. This is where I shine. Okay, you can follow us everywhere at She Well Read. Super excited that I don't have to tell you 20 different handles to go follow us at She Well Read was available everywhere. So, and we're everywhere at She Well Read. What we like to call the tit is where we are most active on, which is TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter.
I'm stealing that.
Follow us on the tit.
Yes, for our listeners who are tuning in right now, they know exactly what the tit is. But we are also now doing video podcasting. So we're on YouTube heavily. So you can find us, again, all of those places at She Well Read.
And then do you guys have individual socials, or is it just the podcast?
I'm Living Like Lana everywhere. I think I'm like at Living Like Lana _ on Instagram. And then everywhere else is Living Like Lana. So I mean, I'm not that interesting. Maybe a little, but I'm fun. I'm funny.
I would say you're very interesting, and I call my guests out all the time when they're going to give self-talk, so don't do that.
No, you're absolutely right. Oh, I can save you some money on TikTok. I've stopped, but I'm a couponer, so I have some couponing tips on there if you want to save money.
Okay. So you guys didn't even know that you guys were getting investing tips and financial advice here on the podcast.
Look what reading will do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Stop! I can't.
Samra's so sick of me.
Okay. I am at xdressin on social media.
We'll put the links in the description as well, so that we'll have you guys. I really lean on that episode description. It usually is chock-a-block full of links on all the things we talked about randomly and how to stalk my guests, again, only in a loving way. It's really important. The least terrifying way possible, please. But thank you guys both so much for coming on today. It was so much fun and so wonderful to be the first dual guests. Care so much, totally breaking new ground. But for those of you listening to this going, wow, what a cool set of guests. I bet Lillian's had more cool guests on. There's an episode on, as I mentioned, romance books was at the end of October. We also have an author, Yishan Lai. She was at the end of September. Her episode was on accessibility, but if you love an author, you can find us. Again, we very similarly, I made sure to get all the same handles across all the different platforms. I'm on the tit and more. Care So Much Pod across everything. You can email caresomuchpod@gmail.com. Please send me your book recommendations and I will make sure to reciprocate for you. But if you are out there and you are really passionate about something and something you talk about for hours and hours on end, and you feel like maybe you should tone it down or calm down about the thing that you're so excited about because other people make you feel like it's something that they don't care about, just know that I care. I care so much.